The NBA season is quickly coming upon us, and the preseason has ended 2 days ago as of the time of this recording. So with that and everything that has happened in the preseason and looking at it as a whole, I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted to reflect on what happened in the preseason and the potential things of note. And then two, I want to talk about how much those things of note are really even that important because of the constant debate around how much value the preseason actually has, how much it matters, and things like that. So, how much does the NBA preseason matter? Let's get into it. Before I continue on this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you've fallen to that 50%, then please subscribe. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. Also, episode 11 of my Mavs My NBA series is out now, so if you have not watched that one already, So if you have not watched that one already, it would be much appreciated. Okay, so let's just go over like the main crux of the talking points of the NBA preseason, and then we'll have the second part of the conversation after. It's not a conversation, it's just me talking to a camera, but whatever, you get it. Also, as a brief disclaimer, I have watched a good amount of games from this preseason, but I definitely have not watched all of them, and there are a couple of teams that I did not watch a single game from them, so just bear that in mind. I'm also going to be talking about a lot of points that I didn't necessarily come to, but this was the conversation that was happening around the preseason and on Twitter and things like that. So
just a quick disclaimer.
First of all, you got to indulge me as I talk about the Chicago Bulls. I have a full post-game recap over on my second channel going over the Bulls' first two preseason games, I believe it was. So if you really want to hear my opinions on those games specifically and every little thing that happened, you can go check that out. But here are the cliff notes. I love the playmaking, the scoring gravity that made Zach LaVine's life easier, scoring-wise overall, a whole lot more off-ball stuff for him and just everything was easier. I love how involved Vooch is as a screener and play finisher, even though he was not hitting his threes. I love Caruso and Devonte Green and their hustle and defense. I don't love DeMar DeRozan's play thus far. He was pretty much bad in 3 out of 4 games. Also, I did not like that the defensive scheme was so adamant against switching when you really should not do that in 2021. The Lakers. Russell Westbrook looked really bad in all but one of the 4 preseason games. Lots of turnovers, poor shooting from the field. He did recover really well in the Kings game, and that's important because it was one of the 2 games that he played with LeBron and Anthony Davis. So I think he's going to be fine, and I really would not read into the negative things too much. Again, this is something I talked about on my second channel. The Lakers and LeBron teams really always start off slow to begin with, and Russell Westbrook over the past couple of years has tended to start the season slow, so I'm not expecting him and the Lakers to really be a seamless and working, well-oiled machine at the start of the year. Give a couple of games, like 20 or so, I think they'll figure it out, but it's going to be rough early, and I think the preseason was just an indicator of that fact. I do want to note that I'm actually kind of excited about the Toronto Raptors this year, which I've never been a big Raptors guy. Like, it's well documented by Raptors fans that I pretty much always talk negatively about the team, and like, guilty as charged. I don't really care for what they do typically, but I liked what I saw from them in the preseason, especially from OG Anunoby, who seems to have taken a leap as a shot creator, was taking a lot of step back threes and things like that. A lot of good drives to the rim off of the dribble. I think he's going to average 20 this year, and my most improved player pick looks pretty damn solid right now. And speaking of the Toronto Raptors, just to do a brief little rookie report, Scottie Barnes might be my favorite rookie of the class. His playmaking is fantastic. His defense is fantastic. His length is a contributing factor in that defense, but also offensively, a lot of interesting finishes and stuff like that. Jump shot looks not horrible, but also not the best in the world. I think he's going to be really good, and he's going to be a Swiss Army knife forward, which is always a player that I can appreciate. Josh Giddy of the OKC Thunder, who didn't play really in the summer league at all because he got injured like 5 minutes into the first quarter against the Pistons. He has a crazy feel for the game early, and I think that pick is going to end up looking real good. Not only has he had really good statistical games, but he has also displayed a feel for the game that is like A tier from a 19-year-old guard. So for you to have that feel of the game at his size, the jump shot looks not bad, even though a lot of people said it might be. I really like Josh Giddy, and I think he's going to be good. There's not much to say about like Jalen Green or Cade Cunningham. They were up and down. I don't think Cade played too many preseason games. I only watched one. And then Evan Mobley, I watched him play 2 games versus the Bulls, And as I expected, his offense had some rough edges on it. I've said a couple of times now the reason why I don't think Evan Mobley will win Rookie of the Year is because I think his offensive game will take a little bit of time to adapt to the game. He has a lot of flashes of things that he can do, and I think 2-3 years from now he'll be a really good offensive player, and at his peak he'll be a great offensive player. But just right now there's like a lot of raw tools combined with showcases of skills, but none of it is, there's a solid foundation to build upon, but it's not established yet, essentially. And that was really showcased in these preseason games versus the Bulls, where he had a lot of ups and he had some downs. His second game versus the Bulls, he did a lot better than the first one in terms of his scoring game. Defensively, fantastic. That's not going to be a problem for him. He's probably an elite defender already. So on that end, fantastic. But offense, I think this year he'll have some rough edges with the Cavs. Another big preseason team has been the Warriors, who were 5-0, and the noteworthy player among that is Jordan Poole, who averaged like 20 a game in the preseason, added multiple 25-point games. He looks fantastic, and he's even exceeding my own expectations, which relative to the rest of the NBA fan base was very high. So he's going to exceed my high expectations. And then also there's like Otto Porter Jr. and Nemanja Bjelica, who have both been fantastic role players for them, and Moses Moody, who's been good outside of the fact that he's played like 10 minutes a game because Steve Kerr doesn't fucking play him. An underrated factor with the Warriors last year was that they really figured out their rotation and their chemistry in the last like 15 or so games in the regular season, and they started to look a lot better then. It just looked like a more cohesive team, and I think if they had that team for the entirety of the year, they would have easily been a playoff team. Going into this year, they have that cohesion and new players and internal development, and Klay Thompson is coming back. I think the Warriors are going to be really good this year. But that is basically the rundown of all the noteworthy stuff of the preseason. There's some other small things here or there, but that's at the top of the list. If there's some major thing that I have forgotten, then my bad, but that's about it. And now let's get into the second part of this video, which is a conversation of how much does this preseason, and really preseason in general, actually matter. And by matter, I mean there's actual implications for what the teams are going to look like in the regular season and postseason and all of that stuff. Well, I think the issue of what matters and what doesn't, what really comes into play here is that people are not really good at making the distinction between what does and does not matter, and they look at it as a blanket, like either it does entirely or it really doesn't, when it's really a gray area. There are things in the preseason that are very, very noteworthy and can be huge indicators of what a team can be, and there are things that are like, yeah, they're just pointless information that does not affect the regular season. The first thing, and this is like an inverse of basketball otherwise, is don't look at the record at all for a team. It's really pointless. I know I mentioned the Warriors are 5-0 in the preseason, but like, it does not matter. As a clear indication of that, look no further than the fact that the Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks last year combined went 0-7 in the preseason, and obviously those teams ended up making the NBA Finals. Preseason is a time where everything is experimental. Teams are running 15-man rotations. Their starters are barely playing the fourth quarter, if at all, and really barely playing the third quarters, even though for some reason Julius Randle was at the end of the fourth quarter in the game the other day, but whatever. Scrubs and rookies and things like that are kind of given like unlimited reign because it's just like, hey, show us what you can do. Unless you're Steve Kerr and you play Moses Moody no minutes. And overall, the emphasis is not on winning. It is about figuring out what you have and what you're going to do with what you have. Preseason could be an opportunity for a player who otherwise would not have cracked a rotation to showcase the ability that he has, and maybe that affects the team in the regular season. For example, Devonte Green of the Chicago Bulls probably was not going to be a rotation player, but in the 4 preseason games he played, he was electric defensively and brought a whole lot of energy to the team. So I'm pretty confident he's going to be in the rotation this year now. What is valuable and important and thus matters is the internal improvement you see from players. And I don't just mean shots going in. If you haven't seen a discernible difference in skill, but they just have a game where the shots are dropping, that's not really a big deal. But if you see a clear difference in the skill that a player has, then that is worth note. For example, Jordan Poole. He last year was league average 3-point shooting on a decent volume, barely took pull-ups, mostly catch and shoots. This preseason, he has been taking Curry-esque threes on Curry-esque volumes on Curry-esque percentages. The type of shooter he has been in the preseason has been pretty drastically different from what he has been previous. Giannis having a new looking jump shot and going into it confidently and making it. that is a pretty clear indication that things are very well going to be different with him as a jump shooter this year. And that also goes with teams that have rosters that are relatively similar to the previous year. If you can look at what the team looked like last year versus what they've looked in the preseason, you can tell the difference in their internal improvement, a different system, maybe it's a different coaching scheme, anything like that. You can see the discernible differences there, and those showcase themselves in the preseason, and those are things that will persist in the regular season. And as for teams that had a lot of turnover in the offseason, it's just a completely different roster, you can get an idea of how all of those pieces are going to end up fitting together. For example, the Chicago Bulls, they looked really good with how the team fit, and I think the preseason was an indication that, yeah, the fit of that overall roster that added 2 new starters to the equation is going to be better and different, and it works. And the fit was kind of rough with the Lakers, and I think it was an indication of what I already believed, which is that the Lakers and Westbrook are going to be a little bit weird at the start. Really, what you can take away from the preseason is the functionality of the team and fit and different internal improvements, different schemes, and improvements from players individually in terms of their skill from what they did in the season previous. As well as also like a showcase of what rookies and stuff can do against NBA level talent. Really, you should still look at it with a bit of a grain of salt because the effort level and the emphasis on winning is like non-existent. But a showcase of a skill is a showcase of skill regardless of the effort level of the competition. But wins and losses do not matter. A really good scoring game from a player who didn't actually showcase different skills, but it was just like, hey, he had it going that day, especially being that defenses don't try that hard, that's not really a big deal. And I can say as a Bulls fan, seeing other Bulls fans do this, please stop bragging about the preseason record. It's really cringe and setting yourself up for failure. I think the Bulls are going to be good this year, and I am excited for them, not because they are 4-0, but because they looked really good when the players that actually played, or that are going to play and matter, played and did so well. The fact that they were 4-0 in the preseason is meaningless. There are 2 games of this preseason that were really close at the end of the game that if they ended up being losses, wouldn't have made a fucking difference because it was the scrubs and the players who were not going to be in the rotation on both sides of the floor who ended up being the deciding factors in who won the game. So if the Bulls were 2-2 in the preseason, it would make literally 0 difference in how I feel about the team going into this year because the record doesn't fucking matter. So yeah, that's my thoughts on how much the preseason matters. This video ended up being a lot longer than I anticipated, so sorry about that for your viewing, and sorry to Rudy because he has to edit it. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.